Hello, everyone. Today we're going to talk about the American Rescue Plan and how it can help your small business. I'm Jerry Detweiler with NAV. Today is March 12th, 2021, and yesterday President Biden signed this new legislation that provides, among other things, assistance to small businesses. So here's what we're going to touch on real quickly today. We're going to talk about PPP. There's more money there. Restaurant grants, pandemic unemployment, the employee retention credit, shuttered venue operators grant, paid family and sick leave, the community navigator program, and what I know many of you are going to be interested in is more EIDL grants, supplemental money. And just keep in mind that this is brand new legislation and it will be interpreted by the SBA, by Treasury, and by others. So please always pay attention to what the latest news is and consult your tax and financial advisors if you have questions about how it applies to you. So the first update is PPP. It adds $7.25 billion in additional funding for PPP. It also adds new categories of businesses that may be qualified that didn't qualify in the past, largely nonprofits, provided they aren't heavily involved in lobbying, and digital media companies, internet news organizations, they may qualify. Unfortunately, this legislation did not extend the deadline of March 31st that was in the Economic Aid Act that passed at the end of December. There has been talk about extending it, so we hope, fingers crossed, that Congress will act and extend that deadline. Lots and lots of applications pending and many people still trying to get in. If you have not filed your application for PPP, make sure you do so. We can help you at NAV. Go to nav.com/PPP and we'll match you to lenders. Quick reminder that those of you who are self-employed and file Schedule C, you may be able to get more money under the new calculation that allows you to use your gross income line 7 of your Schedule C as opposed to your net profit line 31 of your Schedule C. We've talked about this in a separate video, but it's very important that you take advantage of that if it's still possible for you to do so, because it could mean more PPP money for your business. Now, the second thing I want to touch on is the new restaurant grants. So this legislation includes the Restaurant Revitalization Fund, which is a grant program that will be administered through the SBA. And it will provide money to restaurants and related businesses, food stands, food trucks, food carts, caterers, taverns, lounges, brew pubs, tasting rooms, tap rooms, and others that are in that industry. And basically what it's going to do is allow them to get a grant based on their pandemic loss. So comparing their gross receipts from 2020 to 2019. Good news is that you can also apply for PPP, and if you get both, you just subtract the PPP money out. Now, this is a grant, so it's not a loan that has to be forgiven, but there are specific requirements about how you spend the money. And it's similar, it looks a little bit broader to me than PPP, but similar to PPP. And we'll expect that the SBA will come out with guidelines for this. But this could be tremendous help to businesses in these industries that have been impacted by the COVID-19 crisis. Realistically, I looked at a presentation from the National Restaurant Association. They're expecting a May to June timeframe for this. So go ahead, if you qualify for PPP, consider applying for PPP. And then this may be supplemental in addition to the money that you get from PPP to help your restaurant or related business survive this crisis. The third is pandemic unemployment assistance. And now this one gets confusing because there's actually 4 different programs under pandemic unemployment. There's Pandemic Emergency Unemployment Compensation, PEUC, Pandemic Unemployment Assistance, PUA, Federal Pandemic Unemployment Compensation, FPUC, and there's also a an unemployment program for mixed earners, people who have W-2 income plus self-employment income. That's the Mixed Earners Unemployment Compensation Fund. So I'm not going to get into all the details here, but I will point out that PUA, which is the Pandemic Unemployment Assistance that may be available to self-employed workers, independent contractors, and gig workers who traditionally don't get unemployment, because usually you get unemployment if you have a job, a W-2 job. That's been extended through September 6, 2020. It raises the number of weeks for which you may be eligible from 50 to 74 total, and it provides $300 weekly benefit as opposed to the $600 we had in the CARES Act. Also, there is an unemployment tax break in here that applies to all the unemployment programs here. The first $10,200 in 2020 unemployment benefits will not be taxed at the federal level for households earning less than $150,000 annually. So that may be a tremendous benefit to some who have received some unemployment in 2020 and are expecting a tax bill as a result. Number 4, the employee retention credit. So this is a tax credit for wages that are paid by businesses who either had a full or partial suspension due to government orders, or they had a significant decline in receipts, 50% or more. What I don't think some business owners realize is that self-employed may qualify too. So this is not just if you have employees. You may qualify as a self-employed individual. And you may also qualify if you get PPP. That didn't used to be the case. They changed that. So you may qualify as long as you don't double dip and take credits for that PPP payroll that your business paid. So this is really something to talk about with your tax professional, because it could even impact when you spend your PPP money in terms of benefiting from this along with PPP. But it has been extended to the end of 2021. All right, the Shuttered Venue Operators Grant, SVOG, we're still waiting for the SBA to actually launch and implement this program. They have released some guidance on their website about it, but it's a grant program for businesses in certain industries impacted by the crisis, live venues, museums, theaters, talent representatives, etc. And basically, it can allow them to apply for and get a grant based on, their gross earned revenue. Now, before you had to choose either PPP or the SVOG. Now, what they're saying is you can apply for PPP, and if you get that and then you get the SVOG, you'll subtract out. That's great news, because we're hitting the deadline right now on PPP, and the businesses haven't even been able to apply for SVOG, so they don't know if they're going to get it. So now they can go ahead and confidently apply for PPP, and then if they get that, subtract it from this grant. And there's an additional $1.25 billion allocated for this program. So you go to SBA.gov. This is one grant that you apply for from the SBA. And again, there's guidance there right now, but it's not open yet to apply, hopefully soon. Paid family and sick leave. This is a tax credit that was designed to help businesses that were previously mandatorily required in many cases to provide emergency sick and paid leave to employees, as well as those who have to care for family members due to this crisis. Now, what I've discovered is many self-employed businesses don't realize, or self-employed individuals don't realize, they may qualify too. So I have a friend who's self-employed. She's the only person in her business. She got COVID-19. She recovered, but she was out of work for a couple of weeks as a result. Well, she may be able to take advantage of this tax credit. So this legislation extends that through September 30th, 2021, and it increases the number of days for the self-employed from 50 to 60. It increases the amount to $12,000 as a result of those increased number of days. And it also includes days for getting the COVID vaccine or recovering from the COVID vaccine. So if you aren't familiar with this, you haven't checked it out, and you've either had to take time off of your business because you had COVID-19, or because you're getting the vaccine, or because you're caring for a family member, you may want to go ahead and check this out. Read IRS Publication 7202. That will give you an overview of it, and then talk to your tax professional and find out whether this is something that could be beneficial to you as a self-employed person or as a small business owner. There's also a new community navigator program that is funded through this legislation. And basically, these are going to be people who are going to help you, small business owners, navigate these programs and the benefits. And the SBA will actually create a hotline as well. Now, in the meantime, there's some great resources available if you need help. So don't hesitate to go to sba.gov/local-assistance and find your local resource partners. So that could be your Small Business Development Center, SCORE, Women-Owned Business Center, the SBA district and regional offices are often offering educational assistance as well as help with some of these programs. So if you're having trouble navigating things like PPP or EIDL, or you're unsure about the SVOG and you're interested in it, don't hesitate to reach out to that, but we should soon have a hotline to supplement that as well. And then finally, the one that I know that many of you will be interested in, because we've gotten so many questions and comments about it on our blog, is the targeted EIDL grant. So just quickly to recap, the CARES Act had a grant associated with the economic injury disaster loan. It was up to $10,000. The SBA implemented $1,000 per employee. Then they ran out of money in August of 2020. Then the Economic Aid Act that passed at the end of 2020, December 27th, that one provided these new grants that are more targeted. So your business has to be in a low-income community, has to have suffered an economic impact of at least 30%. And the way the SBA has approached it is you must have applied for an EIDL grant in 2020, and then you will get an email offering you the opportunity to apply for this to see if you qualify. So there is $10 billion allocated for additional funding on top of what's still available under this program, and it goes through the end of this year, 2021. And then there's also another $5 billion for supplemental $5,000 grants to the hardest hit businesses. Now, I'm going to go over that provision real quickly in the next slide. My understanding is it will supplement the on top of the $10,000 your business may qualify for under the targeted EIDL, but we'll talk about that a little bit more in just a second on the next slide. I anticipate, of course, like we've seen with all of these EIDL advances or grants, that the SBA is going to come out with their guidance. So until we see their guidance, we don't know exactly what this is going to look like, because they will implement this program. But if you look at the legislation itself, it's basically saying that these additional supplemental grants of $5,000 will go to businesses that have suffered an economic impact greater than 50% and has no more than 10 employees. It says it's an amount of $5,000. And if you read the legislation, it says in addition to any payment made under the section of the CARES Act that had the emergency grants to begin with, or the section of the Economic Aid Act that had the targeted EIDL grants. Now, I did see on one legislator's website, they indicated that you do not have to be in a low-income community to qualify. That's not the way I read the legislation. The definition of a covered entity appears to be the same as it was in that legislation that passed at the end of December, which is low-income community and economic impact of at least 30%. So I think what this will do is add an opportunity for an additional $5,000 for businesses that otherwise qualify for the targeted EIDL grant, on top of the $10,000 they may get. But again, I'm not going to promise anything until I see what the SBA says. And no doubt in the next couple of weeks, they'll be coming out with their interpretation and guidance about how these new grants would work. But hopefully for some of you, it will mean more money for your hardest hit business. All right, so what can you do now? Well, you could apply for PPP if you haven't done so already. At NAV, we're matching borrowers to PPP lenders. And then get organized. Talk to your tax advisor about some of these things that I've mentioned, because maybe you'll find out that, hey, I'm going to have a lower tax burden because some of my unemployment isn't going to be taxed, or maybe I could apply for that paid family and sick leave credit that I didn't know applied to me as a self-employed individual. So I would really encourage you to make sure you're in touch with your tax professional to see what may or may not be available. All right, any questions? Let's go to the questions. Let's see, the slides. I'm sure we can make the slides available, Marco. do you have any idea of what the American Relief Program is? I'm not sure what you mean. Try to cap the American Relief Act, Rescue Act, with this program or with this presentation, and we've also added the link to the article that we've written that summarizes this. All right, any other questions that we can help you with before we go off our live broadcast? We're continuing to answer questions on the NAV blog, in the NAV's Facebook group, where business owners are discussing their experiences with these programs. That may be helpful to some of you to join and monitor as well. So hopefully between all of this, we're going to, get the relief your business needs to make it through the next few months. And hopefully with vaccines, we'll be seeing a better better situation for your small business as we go into the end of 2020. Amber, yes, we will be happy to share. We'll make sure that we share the slides with you. And then Tyria, does this money have to be paid back? I'm not sure which one you're talking about. Generally, the only thing that is on this list that has to be paid back is a non-forgiven PPP loan. So if you didn't qualify for forgiveness, or if you get the EIDL loan, which is a loan and not a grant, that is not forgivable, then those would be money you have to pay back. But otherwise, these programs should all be assistance that is available to your business that does not have to be paid back. All right, we have a question here from Ray. PPP, can we petition those to get a second round of PPP based on gross income? Yeah, Ray, you raise a really good point that some business owners already got their PPP and maybe even the second round of PPP, and they did not get the larger amount based on gross income. So please, if that's your concern, reach out to your legislators in DC, in the Senate, and in the House of Representatives, and let them know what your business is still facing. But also, the good news is if we get the deadline extended on PPP, then that may enable some of you to apply for a second PPP loan. At NAV, we've had a lot of our customers and a lot of those who have come to us to find PPP applying for the first round. And if the deadline is extended, that will give them more time for them to be able to apply for the second round of PPP and get a second draw of PPP if you qualify. Amber, most lenders are not pulling credit for PPP. In fact, it's very unusual for lenders to pull it for PPP. So I would not anticipate that you would see that. If you apply for an EIDL loan, they will pull credit through Experian. Paulo is asking, I opened my business during the pandemic. Am I qualifying to get some of the help? I believe, Paulo, that some of the tax credits, pandemic unemployment, those programs may be available to you. PPP and EIDL have earlier timeframes currently. So with PPP, I believe it's February 15th, 2020. And with EIDL, it's end of January 2020. Your business had to have been operational. But some of these other credits that we're talking about may be available. And honestly, I'm not sure on the restaurant revitalization grants, what date you have to be in business by. So we have an article going up on the NAB blog where we'll talk about that particular legislation, if that applies to you, and we'll go into more detail there. And will the second draw application fund immediately after the first loan? AJ, what I've heard from lenders is they also are unsure about the timing of a first draw and PPP, a second draw. If you're trying to get one very quickly, I would go ahead, and if you believe you meet the requirements for a second draw PPP, go ahead and apply, and then the lender will work with you to determine the time frame between the first and the second. But it's not crystal clear, and even lenders are not crystal clear on how that timing works between the first and the second draw. All right, I'm going to wrap it up, guys. But again, we'll answer questions on the blog posts that we shared, and we'll certainly come back and share new information as we get it from the SBA and other sources. Have a great weekend, everyone. Bye-bye.